Right, good morning, welcome back. Okay, all the bearings are here. Big old bag of needle roller bearings and seals. And I've got some taper roller bearings for the headstock later on, but we'll come to that when we get to it. For today, I've got to put all these needle rollers into the swing arm and the short link assembly so they're ready to be reassembled on the bike. So let's get on with it. All right, first things first is to release the swing arm and this little short link assembly from paint mode. They're still in that at the moment. I've still got paper shoved in the holes and masking tape over them so that no paint got in there. Let's get all the masking off, get all the plugs out of everywhere, make sure all the threads are nice and clean, and then I'll put the bearings in. All right, in the last few videos, I've had a couple of comments, people saying that I don't do the same amount of chat and narrative and explanation that I used to do. Well, on tutorials, I would do, but this isn't that. This bike at the moment, I just want to get on with it. And I'm hoping that what you see, the actual video, is interesting enough. It's just progress. And I can do so much more if I just shut up and get on with it. Anyway, today I've hit a snag here quickly, so I just want to share that with you, and it might be of interest if you're going to do this yourself. When you press bearings in, we normally reach for a socket that is a tiny bit smaller than the bearing. And if it's too big, it's going to get wedged. So you go to your socket set. This is the normal procedure any mechanic would do. You have a little measure up of your sockets. The bearing, in this case for the swing arm, 28mm. The socket I've got, perfect, real fluke, 27.6mm. It's 0.4 of a millimeter smaller than the bearing. And on needle roller bearings, it's critical because they're very fragile, not like wheel bearings. They're very, very soft and they're only sheet metal lip edge. And if it's too small, you can use a smaller socket, but if you use a socket that's too small, you can crush that lip edge and ruin the bearing. You've got to come out as big as you possibly can, but not so big it gets wedged. So there's a good fluke. I had one that's just under 0.5 mil smaller for the swing arm. Great, job done. So I measured to see if I've got one for the short link, because the bearings in the short link, they're a little bit different in size. They're 26mm. But unfortunately, the nearest I can get on a socket is 26mm. Exactly the same size. It's a 3/4 spark plug socket. It doesn't matter. But the diameter of that tube is exactly the same as the diameter of the bearing. And that's no good because I've pressed that in 4mm further to get the seal on top, and that socket's wedged solid. That's not going to work. And the next socket down on my socket set is way too small. It's going to come around the inside lip of that and it's going to crush the bearing. So I've got to make a little die to press the bearings into the short link, and there's 7 of them. So I'm going to make one out of aluminium bar, go over to the lathe, I've got a piece of bar in there, I'm going to machine that down so the diameter is 25.5mm. So it's 0.5 millimeter smaller than the bearing and perfect for pushing them in on the press. So let's do that first. Now, I'm sure you know this already, but wheel bearings for the most part come pre-greased and sealed. That's what the seal is either side. You don't have to do anything, just put them straight in the bike. But with needle rollers, it's a different matter. They come absolutely bone dry in heat sealed bags. As you can hear, they're completely bone dry. There's not even oil on them. They are bone dry. So it's very important to get some grease on them as quick as I can. And it's easier to do it on the bench than it is when they're pressed into the job. Yeah, you can do it in there. You can massage the grease in. That's fine, as long as you do something. But if they're on the bench like this, in your hand, I can take some time and massage that grease in there thoroughly. What I want to try and do is get it in between the rollers and push it in behind them to fill that area behind the rollers with fresh grease. That way, they'll have a better chance in life, because if there's all grease in there, there's no room for water and then later on rust. So ultimately, take the best time you can when your bearings are fresh out of the packet to grease them as best as possible. Give them the best chance in life. Let's do that next. Right, there we are, needed a tool, made a tool, and got my rear suspension ready to reinstall. I'm really happy with that. It's fully repainted, all new bearings and seals ready to put back in the bike. Now the bike's not quite ready to receive it yet because there's a few more bits I'm chasing, but that's it. Now I've got to say as well, if you haven't got a hydraulic press, and many of us haven't, it took me 30 years doing this to eventually take the plunge and buy myself a press. But if you haven't got one, well, you can still do this. You can still put bearings in with a piece of threaded bar, a couple of big stout washers and some nuts, and screwing it all together with sockets, all it lined up in the right place, turn the nuts and it presses the bearings in. I've done that loads of times in loads of videos. You can see it. If you really are stuck, you can still do it yourself the old-fashioned way for next to no money. Anyway, there we go. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you enjoyed a little bit of insight into these things if you're going to do it yourself. Take it easy, ride safe, and I'll see you next time.